Welcome back. Now that you've had a nice dose of programming, it's time to make some art and animations. In this video, I'll be making the summoner enemy character, a nasty foe that will basically move to a random position in the scene and from there spawn small, aggressive monsters that will hunt down the player. So I've sketched a couple characters I think would fit well with the theme and mechanic of the summoner. Now of course I'm sketching in Photoshop right now, but I sometimes just draw on paper and then scan the sketch I like most and then paint over that in Photoshop. This can give your eyes a break from the screen and can also allow you to draw character sketches anywhere you like, be that on the bus or outdoors. So once you're happy with your summoner character concept, you can begin the painting process. Now a cool Photoshop feature you can use to help yourself out when adding shadows and highlights to your creation is clipping masks. For example, establish the base color of the head. Then you can create a new layer right above that, right click on it and choose add clipping mask. And now you can only paint on top of the previous layer. So as you can see, this allows you to be more precise and just less messy. Once I've painted my character's various body parts on different layers, I'll separate those on a new Photoshop file and export that as a PNG inside of Unity. There, as dark and weird as it may sound, I'll slice up my summoner's various body parts and then drag and drop them into the scene view, renaming each part, tweaking the order and layer, and then making an empty game object I'll place at the center of the character called Summoner. And again, I'll just parent all the parts making up my character to that newly made empty game object. Like with almost all humanoid characters, I'll simply parent the head and arms to the body. In this case, I also have horns, which I'll parent to the head. Now, contrary to the melee enemy character, this one will need 3 animations. A running animation, which he'll use when moving to his random position in the scene, an idle animation that he'll play when he's finally reached his destination, and a summon animation, which of course will play out whenever the summoner spawns a minion to hunt the player down. For the run and idle animations, I'll use the same basic techniques discussed in section 1. As you can see, he has roughly the same proportions as the protagonist, which makes the animation process pretty similar in many ways. Of course, try and add some unique quirk to his animation to make the character stick out more and feel more unique. For example, perhaps his head shakes and jitters during the idle animation to sell that feeling that this is an unstable wizard-like character that might have sold his sanity to gain this summoning power. To make stuff feel shaky, simply select the object you want to shake, move it slightly in a random direction, and then 2 to 3 milliseconds after that, move that same object in a different position, and repeat that process for as long as you like. Anyway, once you've made your idle and run animations, you can hit the create new animation button over here and call this one summon. You can make this animation as long and epic as you like. I'll simply get him jumping in the air, and then with Liam, you'll make it that as soon as his legs hit the ground after his jump, a minion will spawn next to him. So to make a jump animation, I'll select my character's body and legs, and at roughly 15 milliseconds, I'll move those up. Then I'll copy the first keyframes and paste them at around 30 milliseconds. This way my character jumps up and then moves back down. Now our bodies tend to float slightly in the air when performing a jump, before landing back on the ground. So I'll copy the keyframes at 15 milliseconds and paste those at 25 milliseconds. I'll also move the character up a little more, and things already look a lot better. Now usually there's always some anticipation before an actual jump, meaning that the character should squash slightly before leaping into the air. So I'll copy the first keyframes and paste them at 4 milliseconds. This way the character is still on firm ground, which leaves me the time to squash his body with the scale tool. And then a few milliseconds after starting his jump, I'll stretch the character, and at roughly 15 milliseconds, when the character has almost reached the highest point in his jump, I'll make sure to copy the first body scale related keyframe and paste that there to return the character to his normal proportions. You can also stretch the character slightly right before he lands on the ground, and then when he finally does, you can squash him again to make the landing feel more impactful. Without forgetting, of course, to return the character to his normal proportions by copying the first keyframes and pasting those at the end of the animation. So really play around and have fun making this jump animation. Again, the more squash and stretch you add to this animation, the squishier and more cartoony your character will feel. With that done, I can now head over to the animator window and set up the animation transitions. So I want this summoner character to first of all play his run animation, because remember, I want him to move to a random spot in the scene. And you'll see that currently his idle animation is highlighted in orange, which means it is the idle animation that will play by default as soon as the character spawns in game. To change this, you can simply right click on the animation you wish to turn into the default starting animation and choose Set as Layered Default State. And there we go, now my character will play his run animation by default. I'll now make a bool parameter called isRunning and get my character going from his run animation to his idle one only if isRunning is equal to false. I'll also uncheck exit time and make sure that transition happens fast, so no more than 0.1 seconds. There's no real need in this case to make a transition going from idle to run, because once the character has settled into his idle animation, he won't ever run again to a new position. However, I will have to make another animation transition going from his idle animation to his summon animation, and this time I'll use a trigger parameter, which I'll call summon. So I'll right click on the idle animation and make a transition between it and the summoning animation, getting this transition to only work if I've called the summon trigger parameter via script. And again, I'll uncheck exit time and make sure I transition from his idle animation to his summon one in only 0.1 seconds. I'll now make another transition going from his summon animation back to his idle animation. This time, however, I will not add any condition to the transition. I only want this transition to work once the whole summon animation is played out. So I'll make sure to keep exit time checked, setting it equal to 1. This way 100% of the summon animation will play before this transition brings us back to the idle animation. And of course you can set how fast you wish this transition to be. And again, I'll just type 0.1, which is the value I almost always use when it comes down to animation transitions. If you type out 0, there might be an ugly little snap from one animation to the next, and if you keep this value too high, the character will tend to feel a little sloppy. And of course you'll be setting isRunning equal to false and playing the summon animation with the use of my summon trigger parameter via code, something you'll be doing very soon with Liam. So to recap, use trigger parameters for animations you wish to play only once. For example, an attack, jump, or in this case summon animation, and use bool parameters to transition between looping animations. The best and most common example being an idle and run or walk animation. Okay, my summoner character is now completely set up, ready to be brought to life in the next videos with the use of C#. Before moving on to that though, don't forget to make a little minion monster which you will summon. This minion simply needs a run animation and will act exactly like the first melee enemy we made at the start of this section, with perhaps less HP and damage. So yeah, you can have fun making a whole new enemy character, or simply get the summoner summoning the melee enemy which you've already made. That's completely up to you. As you see, I've created a little skeleton character with a simple run animation, and I've added the exact same components as the melee enemy to it, with less health and damage, but perhaps a tad more speed, making this creature completely harmless alone, but more of a threat when in a group. Okay, that will mark the end of this video. Again, I can't stress enough the importance of not caring whether what you're making currently looks good or not. What's key at this point is that you're trying your best and having fun. Keep creating characters, worlds, and games, and you'll improve spectacularly. So yeah, just trust the process. With that said, I'll see you soon to create a spooky flying creature that shoots black, gooey fireballs at the player. Cheers!